There's a certain kind of person who walks through the world with open hands and an even more open heart. The kind of person who sees pain before it's spoken, who senses sadness hidden behind a smile, who offers comfort even when no one asks. You know them, maybe you are them. The empath. The one who gives without needing a reason, who forgives long after others would have walked away, who believes that love means staying, especially when it's hardest. But here's the question no one dares to ask. What if your kindness is exactly what keeps you trapped? What if the very heart that makes you so compassionate is the reason you're constantly being drained, manipulated, and broken by those who only know how to take? Because not everyone sees your softness as something to be respected. Some see it as a resource as fuel. To the wrong person, your empathy isn't a gift. It's an opportunity. And before you even realize it, you're no longer helping, you're bleeding. It begins subtly. You excuse the lies. You justify the coldness. You cling to the potential instead of the reality. And before long, you're caught in a cycle where love feels like suffering and leaving feels like betrayal. But the truth is simple and brutal. If you're giving everything and still being blamed, ignored, or used, you're not in a relationship, you're in a transaction. This isn't about blaming you, this is about awakening you. Because the world will never protect your heart for you, and neither will the narcissist. You have to be the one who decides that enough is enough. That your soul wasn't made to be someone else's emotional landfill. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become if you are constantly being reduced? If you're constantly shrinking to fit inside someone else's emptiness? This isn't just a reflection, it's a warning. The empath must learn. Love without boundaries is self-destruction. Compassion without clarity is servitude, and healing others at the cost of yourself isn't nobly, it's neglect. So if you're tired, if you're confused, if you feel like your light is dimming, listen closely. You were never meant to be anyone's fuel. You were meant to be fire. Carl Jung taught us that the most dangerous parts of ourselves are not the ones we acknowledge, they're the ones we bury. The shadow, as Jung called itis, everything we deny, repress, and refuse to face. Our wounds, our envy, our shame, our hunger for control. But when those parts are ignored, they don't disappear. They grow stronger in silence, and eventually, they seek a host. Enter the narcissist, a fractured soul held together by illusion. On the surface, they seem confident, charming, charismatic. But behind the mask lies a deep, unbearable emptiness. A self that cannot stand on its own. And because they cannot carry their own darkness, they look for someone else to do it for them. That's where the empath comes in. The one who sees past the surface. The one who feels their pain even when it's hidden beneath cruelty. The one who says, "I can help them, I can fix this." But you're not fixing them, you're absorbing them. You're carrying their shadow like it's your own. Jung warned us what we don't face in ourselves, we project onto others. And the narcissist projects everything. Their guilt becomes your apology. Their rage becomes your fear. Their lies become your confusion. They empty themselves into you while convincing you that you are the problem. And because you're an empath, you believe it, you bend. You try harder, you love deeper, and with each sacrifice, they grow stronger while you grow smaller. This is not love. This is energetic possession. It's spiritual parasitism. And it thrives in the space where your empathy is greater than your self-worth. The narcissist doesn't want you to see them clearly. They want you to see the version they've manufactured. The version that hooks you with charm and holds you with guilt. But there is no healing, here only feeding. They need your light because they cannot generate their own. They need your attention because they cannot face their reflection. And they need your forgiveness because they will never offer change. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate." The narcissist never makes anything conscious, but you can. The first step? Realizing that what you're feeling isn't love, it's entanglement. The second? Understanding that you are not here to be someone's shadow bearer. You are here to become whole. Empathy is a gift, but not always the kind you're praised for. It doesn't glitter. It doesn't shout. It sits quietly in the background, picking up what others drop, their pain, their shame, their unmet needs. It's a beautiful thing, until it becomes a curse. Because there's a hidden danger that no one warns you about. When you feel everything, you start to lose the ability to tell what's yours and what's not. And that's exactly how the trap is set. You see, empaths don't just care, they absorb. You don't just listen, you merge. And when you're in the presence of someone who lacks empathy like the narcissist, this isn't balance. It's invasion. They offload. You carry. They lie. You question yourself. They wound. You apologize. All without them lifting a finger. Because while you were learning how to soothe, they were learning how to survive through others. They see your heart and think, here is someone who won't leave. Here is someone who will bend. And they're right. Because your empathy doesn't just open you, it exposes you. It turns you into an emotional sponge, absorbing the moods, holding the blame. Believing that if you just love harder, try longer, give more, they'll finally see your worth. But they won't, because they're not looking at you. They're looking at what they can take from you. And until you make that unconscious wound, conscious Jung warned, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. That's how empaths end up stuck in cycles that feel like destiny but are actually self-erasure. You think you're being loyal, loving, spiritual, but what's really happening is that your boundaries have collapsed under the weight of someone else's need. You've been trained often since childhood to be the balm for everyone else's chaos. And now, every time someone storms into your life, you open the door and let them in. Not because they deserve it, but because you were never taught that protecting your energy is also an act of love. Empathy without awareness isn't compassion, it's self-destruction. And the longer you confuse being understanding with being used, the longer you stay trapped, not by chains, but by your own open heart. To understand the narcissist, you have to let go of logic. This is not a person seeking connection. This is a person seeking reflection. What they want isn't love, it's fuel. Psychologists call it narcissistic supply. And it's not just about attention, it's about control, it's about domination. It's about seeing themselves in your eyes and using that image to fill the emptiness they refuse to face. You, the empath, become their mirror, not to be seen but to be used. Your kindness is converted into validation, your loyalty into leverage, your affection into anesthesia. They feed off you not because they cherish you, but because without your constant reflection, they cease to exist. And here's the terrifying part. They don't want you. They want the version of themselves they see through you. You're not a person to them. You're a utility, a battery, a screen onto which they can project a story where they are always right, always adored, always in control. And when that reflection stops flattering them, when you start to pull away, question, resist, they don't mourn, they panic. Because losing you means losing the illusion. And without the illusion, they're forced to confront their hollowness. They will do anything to avoid that, charm you, guilt you, rage at you, play the victim. Because if you walk away, the mirror shatters and so does their self-image. Jung once said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that's exactly what the narcissist is doing, using you to avoid themselves. But what about you? What happens when you become someone else's mirror for too long? You forget your own face. You shrink. You fade. You start thinking that your worth is tied to how much you're needed, how much you're praised, how much you're used. But you're not a reflection. You're not a supply line for someone else's fantasy. You are a human being with depth, complexity, and needs of your own. The narcissist will never see that, because to see it would mean stepping outside themselves, something they've never learned to do, and something they never will. That's the danger. You think you're being loved, but you're just being consumed. And once you're empty, they'll move on without apology, without closure, searching for the next mirror, the next source, the next supply. At first it feels like love, the attention, the excitement, the focus that makes you feel like you've finally been seen. The narcissist doesn't come in as a monster, they come in as magic. They read you like a script, they reflect what you've longed to hear, they mirror what you've always wanted to believe. But it's not intimacy, it's strategy. Their charm isn't connection, it's currency. You offer depth, they offer performance. And in that quiet confusion, the illusion of reciprocity is born. Because the narcissist is skilled at offering just enough warmth to keep you near. Just enough vulnerability to make you think it's safe. Just enough apology to keep you hoping. But there's a catch. Nothing you give ever seems to reach them. No matter how much love you pour in, the emptiness stays. You feel like you're trying to build a bridge, but it never connects. That's because it was never meant to. According to Jung, the narcissist lives in a state of constant projection. They don't see you. They see parts of themselves reflected in you, the parts they crave, the parts they hate, the parts they can't admit exist. You are not a person in their eyes. You are a canvas. And when the image no longer flatters them, they repaint it with blame, with criticism, with silence. But by then, you're already deep in the story. You confuse emotional labor for love. You mistake effort for closeness. You tell yourself, if I just love harder, they'll come back. But you're not in a relationship, you're in a performance. You're the stagehand keeping their spotlight on. You begin to feel lonely in their presence, hollow after intimacy, tired after trying. You wonder what's wrong with you. But the truth is, you were never met, not fully, not authentically. Because the narcissist isn't offering connection, they're extracting compliance. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But in their case, they don't want understanding, they want control. And you, being the empath, stay far longer than you should, believing that love means patience. But love without reciprocity is not love, it's erosion. And you will keep losing yourself, one compromise at a time, until there's nothing left to give but your silence. It starts small, a denial here, a contradiction there. You bring up something that hurt you, and they tell you it didn't happen. Or worse, they tell you it did, but it's your fault you felt that way. You begin to question your memory, your emotions, your sense of what's real. That's not an accident. That's gaslighting. A psychological weapon designed not to argue with you, but to erase you. And if you're an empath, you're the perfect target. Because you already doubt yourself. You already ask, did I do something wrong? So when the narcissist begins to rewrite your reality, you don't resist. You revise, you adapt, you apologize. Until one day, your voice no longer sounds like your own. Jung called it a psychic split, a rupture between the self you know and the self you've been conditioned to believe in. And under gaslighting, that split grows. You begin to second-guess the obvious. You override your instincts. You tell yourself you're overreacting, being dramatic, too sensitive. But you're not. You're being dismantled, one thought at a time. Gaslighting isn't just lying, it's manipulation at the soul level. It's taking your inner compass and bending the needle, and the longer it goes on, the more you lose sight of where you begin and they end. They say you're imagining things, that you're remembering it wrong, that you're too emotional, and because you feel everything so deeply, you believe them. You think, maybe I am the problem. But here's the truth, they need you to question yourself, because if you don't, you'll start questioning them, and that is something they cannot survive. So they twist, they distort, they reframe every conflict in their favor, until you no longer trust your own mind, until you rely on them to define reality for you. Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Gaslighting is that avoidance made visible. It is the narcissist's way of protecting the false self by destroying yours. And if you don't wake up, you'll find yourself defending the very person who's tearing you apart. That's how deep it runs. But if you feel that fracture, if you hear the quiet voice inside saying this doesn't feel right, listen. That voice is your truth fighting its way back to the surface. And it's time you let it speak. This kind of love doesn't heal, it hurts. And yet, you stay. You cling to the highs, the moments when they look at you like you're the only person in the world. The way they hold you right after tearing you down. The way they whisper apologies that sound almost like affection. But this isn't love, it's a trauma bond. A cycle so insidious, so emotionally addictive that by the time you realize you're drowning, you've already forgotten how to swim. It begins with idealization. The narcissist floods you with attention, compliments, closeness, promises that feel like home. You think you've finally been seen, finally been chosen. But it's not real, it's bait. Then comes the devaluation, the silences, the criticism, the cold stares. Suddenly, nothing you do is enough. You feel like a failure inside a story you didn't write, but just when you're about to walk away, they pull you back in with a smile, a memory, a night that almost feels like the beginning again. And in those moments, your nervous system lights up, not with love, but with relief. And that's the trap. The relationship becomes a loop. Reward, punishment, reward. And every time they withdraw, your mind clings tighter. Your heart says, "This must be deep, it hurts this much." But that's not depth, that's damage. You're mistaking instability for intensity, chaos for chemistry, intermittent affection for emotional intimacy. And that confusion is not your fault, it's conditioning. It's what happens when love is weaponized, when manipulation wears the mask of romance. Jung once warned, "What is not brought to consciousness returns as fate." The trauma you haven't healed will find you again disguised as attraction. And if you don't wake up, you'll call it destiny. You'll stay. You'll forgive. You'll give them 1,000 chances, believing love means never giving up. But love without safety isn't love, it's a trap. And the longer you're in it, the more you forget what real connection even feels like. You think you're fighting for love, but really, you're fighting for survival. And that's the difference between a bond and a cage. One sets you free, the other makes you believe that pain is proof of something real. There's a belief that lives deep in the empath's bones, usually unspoken, often unconscious. I can fix them, I can save them. It sounds noble, it feels spiritual. But beneath it is a dangerous illusion that narcissists recognize and exploit. Because when you believe that love means healing someone else, you automatically make their well-being your responsibility. You become the caretaker, the emotional paramedic, the spiritual life raft, and they let you. They want you to. Because the moment you pick up that role, they no longer have to do the work. They don't have to change, because you've made their healing your job. And the more you try, the more you lose yourself in the effort. What you call loyalty is really self-erasure. What you call strength is often the inability to let go. The narcissist doesn't need to trap you. You trap yourself with hope, with empathy, with a distorted idea of what love is supposed to look like. But Jung was clear. He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. Healing doesn't happen from the outside in. You cannot rescue someone who's committed to their dysfunction. You cannot pour your soul into a black hole and expect light to come out. Still, the empath clings to the fantasy, if I just love them the right way, they'll change. But love is not surgery. You cannot cut yourself open to mend someone else's wounds, and yet you do again and again until the person in the mirror no longer looks like you. That's the cost of the hero complex. It's not just exhaustion. It's identity loss. Because when your worth is tied to being needed, being the strong one, the healer, you stop asking what you need. You stop remembering that healing is not your responsibility, especially not for someone who doesn't want to be healed. Jung warned that trying to save others without first confronting your own shadow is a path to self-destruction. And that's what this becomes, a slow erosion of self in the name of love. But real love doesn't demand your sacrifice, it demands your presence. And presence can only exist when you let go of the need to rescue what was never yours to carry. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop saving and start choosing yourself. There's a kind of hunger that doesn't show up with teeth, but it devours just the same. You think you're being loved, but you're being consumed. Not all at once, bit by bit. The narcissist doesn't love you, They feed on your attention, your availability, your endless empathy. To them, you are not a partner. You are an emotional battery. And the moment you stop producing energy, they either punish you or discard you. This is emotional cannibalism, a relationship where your soul is slowly chewed down to its silence. And the most dangerous part is that you don't even see it happening. Because it doesn't feel like abuse, it feels like being needed. They cling, they demand, they fall apart just enough to pull you back in. And as an empath, you confuse their need with your worth. You think, they must care, look how much they depend on me. But being needed is not the same as being valued. One fills the ego. The other honors the soul. Narcissists do not form connections, they form attachments to power sources. You're not a person to them, you're a charge, a fix, a reflection. And they will drain you without guilt, without gratitude, without even noticing. Because to them, you were never real, only useful, only giving, only glowing, until you don't. And then, suddenly, you're too much. Too sensitive, too emotional, too demanding. But the truth is, you were always giving to someone who never intended to give anything back. Jung spoke of how unresolved, unconscious drives shape our fate. And here you are, giving your life away one compromise at a time, thinking this is love. It's not. It's a transaction dressed as affection. And the more you give, the more they take. No reciprocity, no repair, just hunger. And in this story, the more you bleed, the more they thrive. Until you're nothing but a shallow, once radiant soul now dimmed by the weight of someone else's emptiness. If you feel tired, depleted, hollow, listen, that's not love, that's a feeding. And the only way to stop being consumed is to realize that you were never here to be someone's supply, you were here to be whole. It doesn't happen all at once. The awakening is slow, like a fog lifting after years of wandering in someone else's storm. It begins with a flicker, a moment where their words stop sounding like truth. A silence that doesn't feel peaceful anymore but suspicious. A laugh that feels hollow. A look in the mirror that doesn't recognize itself. And suddenly, you feel it. Not rage, not clarity. Just exhaustion. Deep, spiritual exhaustion. The kind of tired that doesn't come from doing too much but from carrying what was never yours. You start to notice the cracks, the pattern, the constant apologies for things you didn't do, the confusion that lives where your intuition used to be. And the worst part? You can't even explain it, because you've been trained to doubt your own voice, to shrink every time you question the story. This is cognitive dissonance, the tug-of-war between what you feel and what you've been told. And it breaks something open. You realize, this love, if we can even call it, has been costing you everything. Your energy, your joy, your peace. And still you stayed, because they needed you. Because you believed that being strong meant holding on. But now, that belief starts to fracture. The illusion begins to crumble. You're not just tired, you're done. This is the beginning of your return. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But this is where it starts. When you stop twisting yourself to make someone else comfortable. When you stop rewriting your truth to match their fiction. When you decide that your healing matters more than their approval. You don't need an apology. You don't need closure. What you need is you. The version of yourself that existed before the distortion, before the guilt, before the silence. And make no mistake, this path back to self won't be easy. The narcissist will sense the shift. They'll try to reclaim control, through flattery, through guilt, through rage. But this time, something in you stays still, not cold, not cruel, just clear. You finally understand. Their chaos is not your responsibility. Their hunger is not your burden. Their love was never real because it always required your disappearance. And now, you're ready to reclaim the one thing they could never give you, yourself. There comes a moment where survival is no longer enough, where waking up in pieces, giving everything, losing yourself in someone else's storm becomes unbearable. That's when the real work begins. Not of healing them, but of remembering you. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not unbroken, but real. It's not about fixing what they damaged. It's about reclaiming what you abandoned to stay close to them. Because the truth is brutal. You weren't just caught in a toxic relationship. You were caught in an old wound, a childhood echo, a pattern so deep you thought it was your personality. But it wasn't. It was pain disguised as identity. To escape the narcissist isn't enough. You must escape the version of you that tolerated them. The empath who believed love meant giving until it hurt, who thought disappearing was noble, who felt responsible for someone else's inability to love. That version wasn't born out of strength. It was born out of survival. And now it's time to evolve. Not into someone harder, but into someone whole. Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart." That's what individuation demands, an inner confrontation, a willingness to meet the parts of yourself you handed over for approval. The truth is, the narcissist only filled a role. They activated your shadow, your need to be enough, to be wanted, to matter. And that shadow can only be healed by facing it, by integrating it. That's why this isn't about revenge or rage. This is about self-awareness. The only key that unlocks the cage, the moment you realize that your empathy is still yours, but now it comes with discernment. The moment you stop bleeding for others and start breathing for yourself. The moment you don't just leave the narcissist, you leave the story. You exit the role. You stop being the rescuer, the fixer, the one who absorbs what was never meant to be yours. Individuation means you no longer abandon yourself to be loved. It means you walk back into your life not as an echo of who they needed, but as the full expression of who you are. That is the escape. That is the revolution. For most empaths, saying no feels like betrayal, like cruelty dressed in clarity. You were raised directly or through silence to believe that kindness means compliance, that love means sacrifice, that peace means pleasing. And so, you learned to say yes, even when it hurt, even when your soul was screaming. But let me tell you something that might change everything. No is not rejection. It is protection. It is medicine. It is the sacred edge where you stop leaking energy into people who never plan to give any back. The narcissist hates boundaries, because boundaries mean limits. And limits mean they can no longer feed on you freely. When you say no, you shatter the illusion that your love is unconditional, that your time, your forgiveness, your empathy are endless rivers. You make it clear, I am not here to be consumed. And at first, it will feel unnatural, wrong even, because for so long your self-worth was tied to being agreeable, to being the one who understood, who stayed, who forgave. But that wasn't love, it was self-abandonment. Jung taught that whatever we deny within ourselves will eventually rule us from the shadows. And your inability to set boundaries has ruled you long enough. You've said yes when you wanted to scream no. You've smiled through violations. You've made excuses for emotional violence. And all it's done is teach people that you're safe to use, that you won't walk away, that you'll bend until you break. But here's the truth. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors. And you get to decide who walks through. Saying no isn't closing your heart. It's preserving it. It's finally telling the world and yourself that your peace is not negotiable. That your body, your time, your spirit are sacred ground. And from now on, only those who come with respect are welcome. This is the moment you stop apologizing for protecting yourself. You are not unkind. You are no longer available for self-betrayal. That's the difference. That's the shift. And when you say no from that place, not anger, but knowing you don't just set a boundary, you reclaim your life. You think leaving will bring peace, and it will eventually. But first, it brings rage. Not yours, theirs. Because when you stop playing the role, the stage falls apart. And to a narcissist, that's war. When the supply is cut off, when you stop feeding them validation, attention, obedience, expect backlash. Not sadness, not regret, retaliation. They never loved you. They used you, and now they can't. That's when the mask drops, the charm disappears, and what you see beneath it is cold, calculated, and vicious. Smear campaigns begin. They rewrite the story to make you the villain, to punish you for leaving, to make sure no one sees who they really are. You'll hear lies whispered in your circles. You'll feel the sting of betrayal by people who never knew the full truth. It will feel unfair because it is. Then comes guilt. They remind you of everything they did for you, the good moments, the favors. The words you once believed were real. They weaponize your past against your present. After everything I did for you becomes their battle cry. But don't fall for it. They weren't giving. They were investing. In control, in dominance, in keeping you small enough to stay. And when that fails, they retreat into silence, not as space, as punishment, as manipulation, as one last attempt to make you chase what was never really there. This is not the behavior of someone who loved you. This is the behavior of someone who lost access to you. And that difference matters. Because when love is real, it doesn't become cruelty when it's denied. Jung said, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow." And now you see their shadow in full. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you finally did something right. You stopped playing the part. You stopped being food. And for the first time, you chose yourself. Their rage is not a reflection of your failure. It's a confirmation of their dependence. And the only thing more dangerous than a narcissist who feeds is one who's starving. But let them starve. You are not here to sustain someone else's illusion. You are here to wake up, to walk away, to live. There is a silence that doesn't hurt, it heals. A space not filled with apologies or explanations, but with breath, with truth, with you. This is what it feels like when the empath comes home. Not to a place, to a self. For so long you were the caretaker, the healer, the peacekeeper. You were the one who fixed the broken pieces, never realizing how many of them weren't yours. And in the absence of chaos, something sacred begins to rise. Identity, the real kind. Not the version sculpted by someone else's needs, but the one that existed before the distortion, before the role. This return is not loud. It doesn't scream, "Look at me." It whispers, "I remember now." You remember the things that make you feel alive. The stillness that used to scare you now feels like sanctuary. The solitude that once felt like punishment now tastes like freedom. You stop needing to explain, to justify, to prove. Because the person who once begged to be seen has finally looked in the mirror and recognized herself. Jung believed that healing comes through conscious integration. Not by cutting away what hurt, but by understanding it, owning it, making peace with your own shadow. And now, you don't just reject the pain you learn from it. You understand why you stayed, why you loved so hard, why you silenced yourself to be enough. Not with shame but with clarity, because once you know the wound, you can stop reenacting it. You can stop choosing people who echo your past. You can stop needing to be needed and start needing to be whole. The return to self is not a straight line. It comes in waves. Some days you'll feel powerful. Others, you'll grieve. Not just for what was done to you, but for the parts of yourself you gave away too easily. And that grief is sacred. It means you're awake. It means you're alive. You are no longer the emotional sponge. No longer the rescuer. You are not the mirror, not the supply. You are a soul soft and strong, light and shadow, wounded and wise. And in this new space, love won't be currency. It will be communion. You no longer exist to complete someone. You exist to be fully, finally, freely. Let this be the final truth, the line drawn in quiet fire. You are not here to be devoured, not by narcissists, not by guilt, not by the parts of you that were taught love means disappearing. Your empathy is sacred, but it is not infinite. It was never meant to be used as currency, never meant to be drained dry just to keep someone else comfortable. It is a gift, but only when given in balance, in clarity, in consent. If you keep offering it to those who only know how to take, you won't just feel tired. You will vanish, piece by piece. smile by smile, until there's nothing left of you but the memory of someone who used to shine, someone who once laughed freely, someone who once dreamed. The narcissist doesn't stop taking when you're empty. They stop when you're gone, and even then, they'll say it was your fault for not giving more. But this is where it ends, because now, you see, not just them, but yourself. You see the pattern. You see the cost. And more importantly, you see the choice. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And this moment of reckoning is your awakening. The world will still try to pull you back, into the role, into the silence, into the habit of being less so someone else can be more. But now you know, shrinking is not spiritual. Being used is not loving. Saying yes to pain is not the price of connection. The truth is simple. You were never meant to be anyone's emotional fuel. You were meant to burn with your own light, to glow from within, to love without losing yourself. And from this moment forward, that is your vow, to protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is, to say no without guilt, to walk away without apology, to love but not bleed. You are not here to carry others through their darkness if it means abandoning your own light. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to awaken, to live, to be intact, whole, sovereign, and finally free. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.